number one question that I get asked with watching so many horror movies is, what are the horror movies that actually scared you? Or what's the scariest horror movie you've ever seen? So I actually compiled a little list of all of the horror movies that actually terrified me. And not horror movies that like I watched when I was a kid that scared me, because of course you're going to be a lot more scared of things as a small child. But I'm talking about movies that I watched as a full grown adult that freaked me out, that had me like second guessing turning the lights on or looking around, making sure that nobody else was there in the room with me. And so I'm going to go over specific scenes in movies. So just be forewarned that there may be some spoilers ahead, but let's get into it. First up is Anything for Jackson. This movie as a whole is just like so creepy. The whole imagery, the way that it's shot is just scary. But the fact that it has to do with like evil old people and like evil old people who seem like they would be sweet old people, I don't know why that gets me so much. Old people in like horror movies freak me out. But the scene that really got to me was like when the main guy, the grandpa, is lying in bed and he like wakes up and he's like talking to who he thinks is his wife, and she's in the bathroom and he's like apologizing to her or something, and she's not responding to him, and he starts to get this like weird feeling like, what is she doing in there and why isn't she saying anything to me? Because we see her standing in the bathroom like over the sink or something, and she's like doing something with her hands. We just can't quite see what it is. And then all of a sudden, it pans to her feet, and we start to see things falling by her feet and like hitting the floor. And then she slowly turns her little old lady feet towards the bed, like she's gonna walk towards the bed, and we can't see her yet. But we see things falling, and we realize, oh, those are teeth. Her teeth are falling out of her mouth and hitting the floor as she's slowly walking towards her husband in bed. And he's getting like freaked out. We see the fear in his face. And then it shows us this old woman, and her teeth and her mouth are all bloody, and she's just flossing, and she's just like dead staring into his eyes, into his soul. And I don't know why that scene got to me so much. There's just something about like the teeth falling and the dead stare that just shook me up. That was a no for me. There's a second scene in the movie that I think is just as scary, if not scarier, where the pregnant woman is trying to get away, and we see this like man figure thing with the bag over his head, and he's like crawling towards her, but he's not crawling like on all fours. He's like exorcist style, like he's like hunched back over, and he has this bag over his face, and he's like crawling backwards towards this pregnant lady, and he's making these like unnatural body movements. There is something about unnatural body movements that I have like a visceral reaction to. I just cannot deal with it. I don't know if it's like the bones cracking, because there's always like sound effects that go with it, like bones cracking, or it's just like seeing it and knowing like this is, your body shouldn't be doing this right now. That's freaky and demonic. All of this together, I was like, I'm out. I hate this. Next up is His House. And this movie is so underrated, which is super unfortunate because it is a beautifully crafted film. It's just a very well done film. And it also like explores very important themes in the movie. And it's really accessible. Like it's on Netflix. It's been on Netflix for quite a few years, I think since 2020. But in this movie, there are refugees that come from South Sudan to Britain, and they get placed in this like very dingy, dirty, rundown home. So the home itself already feels like very just cold and unhomey and unsettling. But then at night, it's just like that much scarier because of that. But there is this scene where the main guy is like cutting wallpaper down or like ripping it off the wall, and he feels something like touch him like on his back. And so he like turns around, and then we start to hear this like creaking and footsteps coming down the hallway, and he's trying to like fix his eyes on whatever is down this hallway. And then all of a sudden, we see this person kind of walk into frame, and it's very dark in the hallway. And this person just slowly turns their head towards the main character, and it's wearing a mask. And so it just feels so terrifying. Then the main character like looks away really quickly because he hears dishes like clink in the sink, so he gets scared. And then when he looks back, the figure is like gone. But then all of a sudden, we hear these footsteps start pounding like really fast, really close to him. And this masked figure like zooms by him and just whispers or like says, "Mama," in this really creepy voice. And then even from there, the scene progressively gets scarier and scarier. It's probably the scariest scene I've ever seen in a movie. And I remember watching this for the first time during COVID, and I was like, it was really late at night. I mean, we had nothing else to do during COVID. So like I was staying up till like 2 a.m. watching movies. And I remember watching this and I got so scared at this scene that when the creature like ran by and said "Mama," I literally took my comforter and I pulled it up over my head because I was like, I cannot see this right now. This is too freaky for me. This is a terrifying film. Next up is The Descent. This movie is so terrifying, but it is one of my all-time favorite films. But knowing that you and your friends are trapped in this cave with no possibility of being rescued because nobody knows that you're in this cave and nobody knows that this cave exists, it's so anxiety inducing. It's so claustrophobic. But the scene that really gets me is when the girls are like in the depth of the cave and like their anxiety is an all-time high because they're realizing that they are not getting out of this cave and they don't know which way to go from here. And it's very disorienting because it's like they're all screaming, they could barely see it, it's very dark in there, and they think that they've already seen somebody in there, but they weren't quite sure, and it doesn't seem like a possibility that there would be even another human being in there. And the cave is like dripping wet, and one of the girls has a camcorder, and so she's trying to use the night vision to like see what's going on. They're all screaming and panicking, and she's like, "There's just dead animal bones everywhere." And then it pans away and then it pans back. All the screaming is happening, and then all of a sudden we just see this crawler for the very first time standing behind one of the girls. And then it does this loud screech, and then just full panic ensues. And again, the scene just gets crazier from there, where we finally see the crawler for like its first time not in night vision. And it's just horrendous looking. This is where I would just lie down and die. Like I would be like, I am not trying to run away from these cave people, these cave creatures that have adapted to the darkest of dark and like uninhabitable living conditions. No, just take me. Next up is The Strangers. Now, I know a lot of people don't find this movie scary, but I genuinely was terrified of this movie when it came out. And it's not like any specific scene, it's just the movie as a whole. Like the premise of people just terrorizing you in your house simply because you just happened to be there is so scary to me. Like, and people cannot deny that The Strangers really changed up the home invasion genre. Like having no motive for somebody just being in your home, like you're not rich, they're not looking for revenge. They were just like, that's the house that I want to kill somebody in today. And that's scary. That's so terrifying to think about. No. Next up is Sinister, and this is like in the same vein as Evil Old People, but evil little kids in horror movies is so terrifying to me. But these kids in Sinister are even like that much more creepy because they are playing out like some of the most evil, heinous kill scenes, and it's so creepy with it being filmed on like Super 8. It's just terrifying to me. But this scene that gets me is when Ethan Hawke is like walking down the hallway, and he's been hearing a bunch of little like creaking in the house already, but he's hearing something going on down the hallway, and he's like slowly walking down the hallway, and you can see like genuine fear in his face. Like I truly think that he was scared while filming this scene. That's what it looks like. But he's walking towards this room, and then we just see this box, and so you already know like something is going to come out of this box, and I just don't know when or what it is. And so you're already like anticipating something happening, and he's just so scared. He's walking towards it. We hear these noises, is. And then it kind of like hits the top of the box. So you're like, okay, like already a small little jump scare. And then all of a sudden, like the little boy pops out of it. But again, it's like backwards and kind of unnatural body movement looking. And he's just screaming at the top of his lungs. And this scene, like my heart just like dropped to my butt. I was so scared when watching this scene. Too much. And second to last is 28 weeks later. This beginning scene is truly one of the most anxiety inducing scenes I have ever seen in a movie because of the chasing. My biggest fear in life is being chased. It's just a no for me. Like, yes, unnatural body movements freak me out, but chasing is like a real thing that can happen to you. And that is truly terrifying. So the opening scene, when they're all in the house and like hiding, and all of a sudden we hear this like little boy pounding on the door and he's like, let me in, let me in. And of course we're like, don't let this freaking little kid in, because we know that the infected are going to come in or they're closely behind. But of course they let the little boy in. And so we're just waiting. We're like, we know that these things are going to come and attack these people, but we just don't quite know when. And tension is building, and we see the girl, one of the girls that's staying in the house, and she like peeks out, and it's just all sunny and beautiful. Like, it's so pretty wherever they are, like on the countryside. And then all of a sudden we see these like crazy eyes pop into the screen, and it just like breaks through the wall and it gets her, and they just take a huge chunk out of her arm. So we know that immediately she's infected, and they turn so quickly. Like, once they're bitten, then they turn super quickly, so there's no like downtime to get away from them. And like the camera's moving so fast, and there's so much running, there's so much biting. And then Dawn, one of the main characters, is like, has the ultimate betrayal, and he leaves his wife in the room with all of these infected, and we just know that she's most likely going to die in there, and he's just running for his life. He's running, and then we just see the most iconic shot where it's just hordes of infected people running toward him from all angles. And you're just sitting here like, there's no way he's going to get away from them. Like, these are freaking Olympic running infected people for some reason. And also, where is he going to go? And my heart, I remember watching this. It must have been like my freshman year of college. And I was like putting away clothes. I just wanted to watch something like while I was doing my laundry. And I started having a panic attack because I could not handle this chase scene. And I remember turning it off immediately, sitting down and like doing breathing exercises, because I was like, no, I can't handle this. If there's anything with infected people or zombie-like things where they can run, I am checking out. I will gladly turn. There is no way I am trying to exist in a world like this. And lastly is Gonjiam Haunted Asylum. This is the movie that I always recommend to people when they're like, I want a genuinely scary movie. And even though the first like 20-30 minutes of this movie isn't scary because it's like a found footage film, so we're leading up to like the storyline or who these kids are, and they're young YouTubers, so it's like very jokey in the beginning. But when it gets scary, it gets terrifying, okay? And I feel like the scene that gets everybody is when her eyes turn all black and she makes like the creepy little noise. But that's not the scene for me. The scene that gets me is when Charlotte gets stuck in the basement all alone, because she's down there and she only has this little flashlight or like the light on her camera, and she's like stuck in this basement and she's whimpering but also like trying not to breathe so that she doesn't alert anything that's like possibly around her. And she pans the camera to see the whole room of this basement. And at first we don't see anything. It looks empty. And we're just sitting here like, I know something's going to be there. I just don't know what it's going to be. And then we see it. It's this creepy, headless distorted figure. And again, it's this like unnatural body movement or placement that's so scary to me. And what's freaky is that this figure doesn't even move at first, it's just still. And then when it moves, of course, it makes this bone cracking noise that's just disgusting. But the scene progressively gets scarier and scarier to me. But I was watching this all alone on my laptop in the middle of the night, and I actually was like, I think I want to turn the lights on because this is like too much for me to handle right now. I don't like the thought of like, what if this distorted, creepy figure pops up in my room somewhere? I genuinely think that this movie is one of the most terrifying movies I have ever seen. And there you have it, all the horror movies that have genuinely scared me or freaked me out. Please leave in the comments which horror movies that have scared you, because I feel like it's so rare for like horror movie lovers to actually get scared by horror movies these days. But when it happens, it is so good. It's such a great feeling. I don't care how weird and twisted that sounds. But thanks for joining me, and I will see you in the next video.